We do a lot of well, yeah, it's a lot of research.
I'm gonna let someone else
I was like going to get one, move him over. I was like,
But you want to say
no?
You want to say here?
You know, I just want to say how's the day.
Yeah.
So that's the whole folder. Yeah. So you want to move that whole folder somewhere else? It's supposed to be here.
It's not a folder.
You don't want to give us
That's a multi-take.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So your application is not actually.
there's probably.
Oh yeah.
So that is the folder that contains 13.
I can try to.
No, because views are in here. So here,
But it's not.
you mind if I write on here?
No.
Alright,
So Phil said it.
what did you expect to see? This is actually, this is it. This is where
This is no sense of line.
and then,
So
so,
this is first.
alright, so what you need to move is not node app 2, but you need to move the first app into your views. And so there's a couple things wrong with it. So first of all, calling it first app is not really important because you need the extension to get the views are in the original image, and then your application is going to convert them to HTML. So first things first, yeah, you need to get that extension and get rid of the space in the name. So you can do that from the command line. You can do it right here. So you get first app. Say rename. You go ahead and like, yeah, that's good.
It's not typed.
No, it's right there.
Oh.
You move that into the views folder. So go ahead and pick it and drag it into the views folder. Let's try it. That, yes. So that's already that's fine. That's no problem. Through there without tripping over. So then typing, first tab.
But it's alright.
Tab. Hit tab. See how you know you have. We can get that stuff under there. Okay. So you're gonna go ahead and type views.
I think you're good.
Tab. I was super careful last time. See how
Do we need to have that
that
before
that means that
senator and
right
cash?
Yeah. Just.
Okay.
So now go back.
Okay.
Actually, it's on your app.
Okay.
Just say start.
How's it going, Brent?
And
That's still not even that close.
so there, your application is
Close enough, though.
Go to the browser and refresh. Okay, because your application.
So we dropped another power strip down here.
I may stay.
Then you're on the index.
Yeah, I am. I'll
You
get
mean
it.
that I'm getting first node app, right? So go ahead and end of that.
Just try to run it.
Yeah, I'm gonna run it.
Great. Otherwise, I'll die.
Yes, no, I can put it right.
We don't want that.
No, we don't want that. And I'll take like half the technology with us.
Yeah, exactly.
We really don't want that.
The video that you shot looked great.
Oh, did it? Awesome.
Yeah,
From the Hangout?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because when I had asked you that question, when I was running into that error issue, I went back and watched.
In there. All right, so we are getting close to getting started here.
Yeah.
Where are we? So where are we at? How did the homework assignment go? I heard a couple of difficulties that people encountered. Did most people get it? Did people get help coming to class early getting it? So I will run through real quick doing the homework assignment. Just spend a couple of minutes on it. Keep reading that literature that I also pointed you at. Today, however, once we finish up with that homework bit, we're going to go into creating HTML. So we're going to learn about HTML. And importantly, we're going to learn about using HTML inside of our Node Express application. So I mean, we can write HTML all we want, but if we can't get it out on the internet, same problem. Well, we already know how to create a Node application. We kind of already know about the public directory, maybe a little bit, but we're going to take advantage of that and actually build a static web page, a static website. So, and then we're going to go over Git as well. Something that you will see me do throughout the course is introduce concepts and material without going into details. It's sort of like, well, we're just going to do it, and we might even do it a couple of times, and you're going to get used to kind of doing it by habit without quite understanding what it is, but you're going to get that exposure, and then I'll be like, and here's what it's for, or and here's why we do it this way, and it'll be, oh, okay, now I get that, and I already know how to do it. So that will be a common theme. I will try, nevertheless, to have resources up on the GitHub page about that material. So, like, I put that whole Git resource up there, even though we didn't cover it, so that it would be available. But we are going to go over that today as well, because the HTML, I don't think will take about the first half of the class. So. Okay, questions about how today is going to run? No? All right, so let me do real quick. I'm going to run through our homework. So I'm looking at our GitHub page. And it's at the bash heroku homework, right? So I'll just click on that and get the link for it. It says, okay, create an Express app and upload it to Heroku. Refer to the lesson material from today's class if you run into trouble. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. I have no idea where to start. I want to go to that heroku.md file down there. And then we have instructions for creating a node.js and Express app. So I'm going to follow these instructions. First thing I need to do is open up my terminal. And CD into whatever directory I want to create my project in. Now, something that came up, we don't want to create a new Express application inside the folder where an Express application already exists. Make sure you're putting these things in their own folders, otherwise you'll get some weird conflicts that are hard to explain and hard to figure out what's going on. So if we look at the directory I'm in, I'm just in Documents, OKCoders to HTML, and if I do an ls here, boy, that's a little bit of a mess because everything's so big. We'll do that. We see I've got a couple of directories in here, but I'm obviously not in an Express folder. There's no package.json file or public reviews or anything like that. So I'll make a directory. It says node/app, and I cd into that directory. And I can confirm with pwd that that is now where I am, and it is naturally an empty directory. Right? Okay, generate an Express application with the Express command. So I'm just going to type Express, and inside that directory, it is going to create everything I need for my Express application. However, it does not install the dependencies. We're going to learn a lot more about what that means in the future, but it's the third-party code upon which this application relies, code that we do not want to write ourselves. So to install those dependencies, I type npm install. And we'll learn more about that as well, but npm, again, is the node package manager. It handles this third-party code for us. So I do npm install, and it is going to pull a bunch of information or these node packages from the internet and install them. How does it know what to install? That is all inside of this package.json file, this guy right here. And again, we'll learn more about the structure of an Express application later. But just to show you real quick, I can cat that file, which prints it out to the screen, right? And we'll see that there is this dependencies section here that has a bunch of dependencies. That's exactly what npm is installing when I run that command. So that's where that's coming from. And I can confirm that this thing is working, if it is, by starting the application using npm start. So again, the node package manager, but with the start command. And then I'll view it in a web browser. So I'll go npm start. Okay, looks like my application is waiting for me to do something. And I'm going to go inside my web browser, and I go to http://localhost is a shortcut for my web server. It just means my computer. and then :3000 specifies the port number that we want to look at. Web servers normally run on port 80. That is implicit when we type HTTP. That is not the case for our web server. Our web server is running on port 3000. You can think of a port like if you were to call a telephone number, that's the server, but you can dial many extensions at that telephone number. The extensions are kind of like the port. It's a way to reach more than one application on a single computer, or more than one person at a single telephone number. So I check it out. That looks right. I get my simple Express welcome to Express, and Express also notes that that has occurred. Somebody asked for this root file. We're going to learn what that means today. And then somebody also asked for the style sheets style.css file, which was requested by the root file. So great, I've confirmed that that's working. So what do I want to do next? Looks like I should go ahead and Control-C my application to terminate it. And that is how you do that. So I hold down the Control key and press C. And now Node is no longer running. If I try to refresh my page, it's dead. And there is no server running on my computer anymore. All right. So install an Express application, confirm that it's working. Let's get this thing uploaded to Heroku. Recall that Heroku requires a proc file, which tells it how to start the application when you upload it. So I use the touch command to create an empty proc file. I can confirm that it's there. There we go, empty proc file. And then again, I'm going to use this echo with redirection. So we haven't learned what redirection is yet, but echo, if you recall, just prints out what I give it to the screen. Redirection says, hey, don't print it to the screen, stick it in this file. And it's indicated by the two greater than symbols. So I'm going to echo web:/node.bin www. How in the world do I know how to do that? Well, partly I followed the instructions at Heroku's Getting Started with Node.js tutorial, which I included a link to in this document. And if Heroku wants to load, we can see that there's a bunch of instructions kind of like that. And one of the things they talk about is creating a proc file and specifying how we start the application. And we do it a little bit differently than the instructions that Heroku provided. That is because they're using an older version of Express. So.
But you don't have to name it proc file, right?
Yes, you definitely have to name it proc file. When you touch it, it must be called proc file with a capital P. So otherwise, basically, Heroku has established an implicit contract that maybe we don't know about, but the contract says, hey, if you upload any application to my servers, you must have a proc file in that application that tells me what to do after it's uploaded. So, and we learned that from reading Heroku documentation. So I'm echoing the web process start command into my proc file, and I redirect it there. Use tab for auto completion. If I'm on a Mac, we can use foreman start to check that that works. Foreman uses the proc file just like Heroku does. Still don't have a solution for this on Windows, so I'm not going to do that. I will just continue to start my application manually. But now I have everything that Heroku requires, so I need to commit the application to a Git repository so that I can push it to Heroku servers. And I'm going to keep throwing this lingo at you, and eventually it's going to become second nature. So, but please feel free to stop me if you're like push and Git and repository and what is he talking about? So I use the Git command, initialize the application, or excuse me, initialize the repository within it. We can see now that there is a hidden .git directory inside of this folder, and that contains everything that Git will use. That doesn't help. Right now my repository is empty. Git will tell me what to do. We're going to learn more about this today. But if I run the command git status, it's going to go, hey, you have a repository, but you're not tracking any files. Maybe you want to add these files. So Git will be helpful. We can always use the git status command to figure out what to do next with Git. Or we can follow the instructions, which say git add. So I do git add, and I'm going to use the dot shortcut or alias to represent this current directory and all files and folders inside of that directory, as far deep as they go. So git adds a whole bunch of things and then complains about weird line endings, which we're going to ignore. But adding is not good enough. What I'm basically telling Git to do is track these files, but Git has not saved them to its repository yet. And again, I can see this by typing git status. And it goes, hey, we're tracking these files here, but they're not committed yet. Somewhere the message is in there. So I do git commit I use the im flag or the im option and pass it a message in quotes. So, and traditionally we say initial commit for that first commit. And Git doesn't report any errors. These things are now all inside of my repository, and I can confirm that by typing git status. It says on branch master. We'll learn about those in a couple of weeks, maybe next week. Nothing to commit, working directory clean. We are good to go. Everything is in our Git repository. We can now use Git to push to Heroku.
But this is all local, right?
This is all local, that's right.
Now, okay.
Yep, so everything we've been doing right now is happening on our computer. And there's a workflow that is worth discussing. We'll do it a little bit today. Basically, you do development locally. You test everything locally. Often you push with Git or upload to a pre-production server or like an alpha server where you run testing inside of an environment that is identical to your actual web server, so you can see if anything has gone wrong really badly. And then when you've tested everything, and that pre-production server is remote, that's somewhere else, you then upload everything to your actual production server, and it goes live on the internet, and now everybody else has access to it. So there is this workflow. You'll see if you're reading these documents on GitHub, I introduce terminology using italics. Every once in a while, you'll see italics. Sometimes the italics are used to indicate like a local file or the name of a folder. Other times it's terminology. So you're like, why did he highlight push, or why did he use italics for push or repository? It's because that's the terminology, that's the lingo for it. So, and locally is one of those terms. Locally just means on our machine. Okay, so before I can push to Heroku, I need to create the Heroku application. And again, we just use the Heroku command with the create subcommand. So I can do, and once again, I am still inside of the directory where I created this project. I've never changed directories after I went into it, right? So that's where I still am. Heroku create. Shouldn't have any problems. Maybe Heroku takes a sec. There we go. And it says, okay, this is the URL that you're going to use. And we added this Heroku remote repository, which we'll learn about today. But basically that means I have my Heroku application, and I can simply push to Heroku. So I use the get push command. I use the Heroku name that was provided by the Heroku create command. And then I'm pushing the master branch, which we will learn about in future sessions. And it will upload it to Heroku. And so what's gone on is, like, I basically asked Heroku for resources from their server pool. Heroku says, okay, we just set aside resources that are waiting for your code. Upload whenever you're ready. But we've got resources for you. And then as soon as I upload my code, Heroku redirects it to the right server system that it's got, starts up that web application process using my proc file, and then if everything worked, comes back and says, we launched, we're done, everything's good to go, here's your URL. So we basically allocated resources on Heroku's server pool, which is nice. There are much harder ways to do this. I can confirm that this is in fact working using the Heroku PS command. PS stands for processes. It's what's running on a system. I can use the PS command locally to see what's running on my computer. And so right now, bash is the only thing that's running inside of this terminal session, and bash is my terminal. If I were to start up Node and run PS, it would also show me that Node is running. This is a command that we did not cover, but should be mentioned in that bash book that I pointed you guys at. So I'm going to use Heroku PS to see what's going on over there. It says that the web process is up. Here's when it started about a minute ago, so everything should be working. I can confirm that. I could either go directly to the URL, or I could go use the Heroku open command, which just opens the URL for me. And is a little nicer than remembering the URL. And so now this is on the public internet. If any of you were to go to glacialcrag8169 with dashes, .herokuapp.com, you can now access my website. It's not a very exciting website, but what the kind of effort that this used to require, that Heroku makes really easy, is pretty amazing. So we get to be a little spoiled. Now I did say, hey, let's update our application. And so I think there was some question about how this works. When we make changes to our web application, we need to then recommit those changes and re-upload it to computer, because all of our development is happening locally. Nothing is being pushed to the server yet. What do we edit? So if I look at these files here, I'm just going to do it from the terminal. I have this public directory and I have this views directory. We're going to learn about the public directory today, and we're going to learn about views in a couple of weeks. But basically, static HTML, HTML that does not change, and any assets such as JavaScript or CSS files or images, stuff that doesn't change, goes into our public directory. Content that changes depending on what the user is doing or who the user is or which page they're visiting, we'll need to be able to connect to a database and pull information from it and then inject that into our HTML. That stuff goes in views. And right now, our Express application is set up to use views using the special templating language called Jade. We will learn about all this stuff. And we don't have anything on our public directory, and so there was some confusion about, like, what do I edit? Do I edit stuff in public? Do I edit views? How do I edit views? What in the world is this weird stuff that's not HTML? Don't worry about it just yet. I am going to edit the index file in views because that is where this file is, or this information is coming from, this HTML is coming from. So I'm going to use a terminal text editor called Vim. You do not have to use Vim, but if you like to, feel free. And then views index.jade. And you'll see that I've got this little bit here. And what I can do is I can change this text inside of my index.jade file. So I could like add another paragraph. And then write that. If you're using Vim, type, well, I'm not even going to go into it. Don't use Vim unless you really are feel comfortable using the command line. I still am not comfortable using Vim. But basically, I edited that page. I can confirm that locally. We should always confirm our changes locally by typing npm start. And that's going to run my server again on my computer. And then I just go to my localhost 3000 URL. And I see that this new paragraph is there. That's the change that I've made. So we are now ready to add those changes to our repository, commit the changes, and push them to Heroku. So I kill my node application using Control-C. I go get status will tell me what to do if I'm not sure what to do. It goes, hey, you modified this file. You should add it and then commit it. So I go git add views. I'm using tab for auto completion index.jade. Git commit with my m flag and a message. Added paragraph to index.jade. Says okay, great. We got that done. Get status says we're good to go, which means we are now ready to push this to Heroku again. Note, if I view the application on Heroku, so I'm refreshing here, it's the same old stuff. Nothing has changed, right? Not until I do git push Heroku master. And so my application gets recompiled, loosely speaking, re-uploaded to Heroku. Heroku says, okay, do I get what you're talking about? Hopefully it gets what I'm talking about. Didn't break anything. Looks pretty good. I can refresh my Heroku application or, again, use the Heroku open command, but I'll just refresh it over here. And there's my other paragraph. Right? That workflow, that is maybe still a little strange, is the workflow we are going to use every single time. So we started with it from day one. That is going to become second nature. Basically, create an Express application, set up a Heroku app, create a proc file. That's kind of like your initial configuration stuff. And then add stuff to the repository, push it up to Heroku. Make changes, add it to the repository, commit it, push it up to Heroku. Make changes, add it to the repository, commit it, push it up to Heroku. That process is going to become second nature, probably very quickly. So. All right.
When you added just then to Git, when you did git add and you specified the actual file, if you just did git add current directory,
that would work fine.
That would work fine too.
Yep. So what will happen is, if let's say I had edited a bunch of files. So real quick, let me change some files. So I'm going to touch the. I think this will work. Public, actually, views index, and I'll touch views layout and see if Git recognizes changes. No, I'd have to actually edit them. So let me just say it in short. So if I changed a whole bunch of files, let's say I had 5 different files that I've changed. And if I want to add all those files and commit them, then yes, I could do git add and then that period, right? And that would just do them all for me. I don't have to specify them by name. But if I wasn't ready to upload all of those files to Heroku yet or commit them all to the repository, I could do the 1 or 2 that are finished. save those to Git, commit them, and then push that up. And Heroku will only push up the things that have been saved to my repository. It won't push up things that I haven't saved and committed yet. So that lets me like do quick fixes on my application without throwing away the work I'm already involved in, without pushing that work that I'm involved in that's unfinished up to the server. I can control exactly what I want to see published to the public internet. So we're going to learn how to use Git a lot more. Git is extraordinarily powerful. I still don't know how to use everything in it, but that is an example of one of the things that we can do with it. So, okay. Questions? We had a neat question. Brent, who I think is here, I saw, right? Yeah, Brent asked a question. How do we use head? We saw that we have this head file to peek ahead inside of a text file, right? So I can do head on package.json, and it's going to show me the first 10 lines. I can use head with the in flag to specify the number of lines I want to see, let's say 4, and it will show me the first 4 lines. Well, what do I want to do if I want to see 4 lines but after the first 2 lines? So I want to skip the first 2 lines, or I want to skip the first 10 lines and see 5 lines after that. But I don't want to use tail because I don't want to see the last lines. I still want to limit the number of lines that I'm seeing. How do we do something like that? I mentioned, and this will just be a preview of why Bash, of why the terminal is so awesome, that we can string together commands to accomplish complex operations. We haven't learned how to do that yet. This is similar to redirection, like where I echoed something and sent it into a text file rather than printing it back out to the screen. Well, I can take the result of running head and pass that into another function, and then use that function to change the input, which is now this, and give me a different kind of output. And so if I can remember this from memory, I wrote it down in case I forget exactly how to do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take, say, the head, the first 10 lines, but I want to skip 5 lines ultimately and only see the second 5 lines, right? So I'm skipping the first 5 lines. I want to see the second 5 lines. I'm going to take head within 10 lines first. We already know what that does. It's going to give me the 10 lines. So how do I get rid of these? Well, I can take this input, pass it to tail, and ask tail to give me the last 5 lines. Okay? So I'll go head minus n 10 on package.json. And then I use this pipe command, or this pipe operation, which is the vertical bracket. It's shift / on my keyboard. And that says take this and send it to the tail command, or whatever tail command I want to give. And now the tail command is designed to take the last X number of lines. So I'll say pass in, give me the last 5 lines. And I don't need to give it package.json anymore because it already has its input from here. And that will skip the first 5 lines and pass out the next 5 lines. And this is just a preview of why the terminal is so awesome. Basically, I can string as many of these things as I want together and run really complex operations on input just using really basic programs that are provided by the operating system. So it's pretty sweet. But a little bit of a preview of that and to answer that question. So.
Is there a command that lets you do the whole file? Because I tried it without a number and it said it didn't let me do it.
Yes. So I think the best way to view an entire file, you have 2 options. One is to cat it. Cat will just print out the entire contents of a file, but it kind of vomits it on the screen. Then you have all this text and you don't know what to do with it. We can use less. LESS to view 1 page worth of information at a time and then scroll through it. So that would be the command that you want to use. And I don't have a very large file anywhere in here, so well I could do app.js. So let's do head on app.js. I only get the first 10 lines. I could do cat on app.js and it prints it all out to the console, but now I kind of have to like scroll around through here and it's not quite what I was hoping for. Well, I can use less on app.js. And now it's going to give me 1 page worth of information. So this is the very first line, and this is whatever line 20. And I can then go through it. I'm just pressing up and down with my arrow key, and I'm going 1 line at a time now.
What's the advantage to doing this in the console when you can just look at it in the text editor?
Well, eventually you'll get so fast at the console that it's just easier to do it in the console rather than in a text editor. This is just for, a lot of this is for like quick previewing. Like let's say you don't really want to launch another program and drag it into your text editor or open it with your text editor. You just need to get a sense for what the file has. That's where you would use stuff like this. That's where it'll be faster. I've seen some people who use terminal text editing. They use V or Vim, which are these like terminal text editors, and it is nuts what they can accomplish. Or Emacs if they're super, hardcore. So I'm not that good at it. But I see them work, and I'm like, they work twice as fast as I do. And I know how to use my programs, right? It's just astonishing how fast they are. But you memorize all of these text commands that you have to manually input. It's just like using the command line. You just have to know what commands to use. Like I have to know that it's cat, or I have to know that it's ls. Well, there's like 1,000 commands that you just memorize and instantly can type on your computer, which is way less time than like moving your mouse to a menu and choosing the menu item that you want. And like, where did it go? Okay, well, maybe it was over here somewhere. Oh, it's in that menu, right? Just like using keyboard shortcuts in a GUI. It's faster. Yeah. Only everything is a keyboard shortcut. So. Okay, sweet. Any questions? Let me see out of there. Let's make another Express app. So today we're going to learn how to use static HTML, and we're going to learn how to do it within the context of an Express application, and we're going to upload it to Heroku again. So let's start with that. Get some more practice building an Express application. So find yourself a directory somewhere that does not already contain an Express application. I am in my OKCoders 2 HTML directory, and that is okay. Even though I have the Node app folder here, I'm not in that folder. That's what I mean. So it's okay to create another Express application alongside one that already exists. Let's call this one static-express. So I'm going to make dir static-express, and that's where this application is going to go. And again, if you feel free to raise your hand or stick up a sticky if you run into problems, but I think we're going to start to get pretty good at this. So. And then I want to change directory into that folder to make it my working directory. So cd static express. I can confirm that with pwd. If I do an ls, it should be empty. And once again, I use the express command to initialize an Express application. And it makes everything for me. I can use ls to confirm that, but Express is telling me what's going on, so I believe it. Once again, npm install to install our dependencies. It'll pull everything from the internet. And I can check that my application is working. Make sure you do not have another Express application running in another terminal or something. They'll clash with one another. You can't. Two applications cannot use the same port at the same time. And so I'll do npm start to start this guy up. And what do? We go to our localhost 3000 URL and just confirm that we do have an Express application running. Oh, yeah, sorry. Moving quickly.
Yes.
This stuff is all on the internet, so actually let me point that out. So if you're if I move too quickly, if you go to the OKCoders GitHub page and view the HTML class repository, what I'm working on right now is the static express.md file. And so you can see I make dir cd express npm install. I'm basically exactly following the instructions that I prepare for today's lesson. And that is available for you guys to follow right now. So. You get caught up there? Yeah, almost.
Go ahead.
Well, it's easy. We'll just Control-C to quit our Express application. Now, what I want to show you, right now I am using iTerm. How many of you guys on the Mac, how many of you guys are on a Mac and not using iTerm? So you're on a Mac and you're using the terminal instead. Okay?
I can use it if need be.
Okay, well, we're going to learn why. Actually, I think the terminal supports this now as well. But one of the reasons we like to use iTerm is because I can split the screen. So let me show you a trick here. So I have to like start my Node application. When I want to make changes, I have to Control-C it. Then I have to like go do other stuff in the terminal, and then I have to start my Node application again, and then I have to Control-C it. It'd be nice if I could just leave my Node application running inside of this terminal process, right? I could start up another window here, so I could go to Shell, New Window, and now I've got another window that I can cd into that directory with. So let's see where I'm at. So I'm just going to cd into there. And apologies to Windows users, Git Bash does not allow for copying and pasting, which is stupid. I don't know why it doesn't. And I could do npm start. And now Node is running inside of this guy over here, and I can do whatever I want over here, right? That's kind of nice. If you're on Windows, that's what you're going to end up doing. So you can start up another instance of the terminal of this guy over here. So Git Bash, I think you can anyway. There we go. Yep. So I Control-C'd on it, or Control-clicked it and hit Git Bash. So I can run more than one window at a time. Just make sure you're in the same directory that your other terminal window is in. So on the Mac, what we'll do is grow my initial window here. So I'm going to kill that one. I'm going to grow my initial window here to take up the whole screen, basically. And in the View Shell menu, which you can't see up here, so it's the Shell menu, close to the top left, there is a split vertically with current profile. Let's do that. All right, now I have two terminals in the same window. That's kind of nice. On Unix, there is a screen utility that might work for a Linux system. And it's just as easy to close these things, but basically, again, split vertically with current profile. And whichever one is active, you can tell, is darker. It doesn't have the highlight. And so, let's see where I'm at. I'm no longer in the directory I wanted to be in, so I'll go to my Documents folder, cd OKCoders. Just got to find my directory again. cd Node app. Nope, actually, cd Static Express. Print that out. cd into it over here. Copy and paste, right?
So should both windows be in the Static Express or not?
Yes, that's right, exactly. So make sure your current working directory in both windows is the same. And then in one of those, typically I do it on the one on the left, I can do npm start. I'm running my server, and then I can do whatever I want, whatever else I want in the other one. And that's a pretty nice setup. Now there will be occasion when we have to restart our Node server. Anytime we modify application code itself, we'll have to restart the server because we've changed its code. When we add static content to it, we do not need to restart Node. So anytime I'm adding HTML files or CSS files or anything like that, Node will just realize that we've added new content and automatically use it. So let's see. Okay, where are we at? We have created our new Express application. Let's go ahead and initialize a Git repository for it. So we do git init in that directory. Make sure we're in the right place. And let's go ahead and commit everything to it. So we do git add dot. We do git commit with the m flag, initial commit. Sorry, nope, it's good. Git add with a dot for a period.
So once you're in there, you git add?
Yes.
That's the first thing to do, right?
Yeah. Init, git init is the first thing that you do.
Oh, I didn't.
So if you do git add without an init, it'll complain to you, right?
Well, it actually didn't. It said, "Did you mean this add?"
Nope. So did we get? Sorry. The steps again. Sorry, moving quickly. Is git init first, then git add dot second, and then git commit with the m flag, and in quotes, whatever message we want to use. So initial commit, for example. So, and trust me, we'll do this so many times that you won't even have to think about it. So, and we'll talk about it today. So that puts us in good shape. We could go ahead and create a new Heroku application and upload it to Heroku, right? First, we got to create that proc file, but let's hold off on that, and let's learn a little bit about how static HTML works. So, and we're going to learn how to use Sublime Text today. So you guys are free to use whatever text editor you would like, with caveats. You cannot use Word. You cannot use Notepad. You cannot use text editors like that because they will damage, in a sense, the underlying text file. We need a plain text editor that will not modify the original contents of our text file. Word turns it into a Word document, and Notepad does some weird stuff with line endings, so we don't want to use it. We need a text editor that is really made for writing code with. There are lots of options. Text Wrangler is one, BBEdit is one, Vim and Emacs are options. So whatever, feel free to use a text editor that you prefer. We're using Sublime Text for this class to keep us all on the same page, and because it has some cool features that we'll learn how to take advantage of. So let's see how Sublime Text works, right? I've got it in my doc here, so I'm just going to start it up. It's a text editor, right? I get a basic text editor. I'll blow it up so we can see it better. If we're on Windows, I just start it up. What we sort of ran through too quickly, just ignore whatever errors, what we sort of ran through too quickly last time was that we can use Sublime to view every single file in our project at the same time. That's one of the nice things about Sublime. On Windows, what I'm going to do is go to File, Open Folder, and find the folder that contains my Node application. And so we've called it Static Express, right? Basically, I want to select that folder and open it with Sublime. I don't want to select any of its contents. I want to select that folder itself. And it looks like my Windows VM is taking its sweet time, so let me switch over to the Mac real quick. On the Mac, we can just do File Open and find the folder that we're looking for. How do we know where we stuck that folder? If we've forgotten where we put that folder, we can go to our terminal and say open dot, which will show the current working directory inside of a folder on our Mac, right? If we're on Windows, we can use Explorer dot, as we learned last time, and it will show us where that folder is inside of a Windows file browser, so, which is pretty awesome. And what you should see when you correctly select this folder, so I have to go to my OKCoders folder, I go to my documents, I go to OKCoders, find it wherever you put it on your computer. There we go, Static Express. Again, I'm choosing that folder. Sublime will pull out this side area here with the directory structure for that folder and allow us to open up any one of these. If we click it once, it will show it. If we click it twice, it will open up a tab for it, and then we can go back and forth between these tabs, which is pretty nice. If we look in our public folder here, actually, before we do that, let's look at app.js. This is the sort of the main file that gets run when we run an Express application. This is all JavaScript. This is what we're going to be learning about starting in 2 weeks. But one of the things that it does here, if we scroll down, is this guy right here. It's line 22. Which Sublime should automatically show, I think. It says app.use express.static blah, 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 public. This is a directive to our Express application to make whatever is in that public folder available as HTML or as images or as CSS or as JavaScript. Every time a person goes to our site, running on localhost or running on Heroku, if they request a file, anything, index.html, aboutme.html, cutekitty.jpg, global.css, whatever, Express will first look in that public directory to see if the file exists at that location. So it'll look if there's an index.html file there. And if it finds it, it will use that file and then immediately return control to the browser. So it's done. It will not execute any more application code. It ignores everything else in your program. So we're going to take advantage of that. Today, we are going to fill that folder with some static content, and in the process, we're going to learn about HTML. So, does that make sense, though? Basically, Express is giving us a place to stick our HTML. Okay, if we look in this public folder, So I can click on that arrow key to expand the public folder here. We see that I've got a directory structure that doesn't really contain anything in it. There's this sort of minimalist style.css. We're going to learn about style sheets next week. But there's no HTML. There's no index.html. There's no aboutme.html, whatever. A Express application by default comes with no HTML. There's no static HTML in an Express application. Instead, everything goes in this views folder that we've kind of looked at but don't really quite understand yet. We see that there's an index.jade. This is a minimalist version of HTML with some additional functionality added. And Express knows to use these files when somebody goes to our website. It runs these files and converts them to HTML and then sends that to the browser. We are going to learn how to use this language. First, we got to learn how to use HTML, right? I initially hated Jade and didn't want to use it for anything until I started using it for about half an hour, and then decided it was about infinitely times better than HTML. It's just a lot cleaner. But we got to start somewhere. We're going to start with HTML. So, okay. Lots of setup there. Are we ready? So let's build a web page. I am referring to the document on our GitHub HTML class, html.md. So if you go to the OKCoders HTML class repository, everything I'm talking about is available inside of this html.md document. And if you've fallen behind a little bit, yeah, you guys are going to be just fine here because almost everybody has some experience with this. All right, what is HTML? What does HTML stand for?
Hypertext markup language.
Hypertext markup language. What does that mean?
Hypertext markup language?
Yep. What's hypertext?
I know this. Is the text that refers to
It's definitely references to what?
variables?
Not quite. Other texts. Hypertext is hyperlinks. So it's text that is linked together. Markup is a way of adding information to a document so that a machine will do something with that content. We are marking up documents with HTML. HTML tags are the markup. We start with plain text. We add HTML to it. We've marked it up. And then, of course, the document is a document. Anybody know who invented the hypertext markup language?
Tim Berners-Lee.
This guy over there? Tim Berners-Lee. Tim Berners-Lee invented the hypertext markup language. We're going to learn about him today. The man's a badass. He also invented HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which is used to deliver HTML documents. It is what all web servers are based on. We're going to learn about HTTP in a couple of weeks. We're going to learn about HTML today. So, we still write our documents in plain text. So hypertext differs from, say, a Word document, which uses a proprietary binary format. Like if you look at a Word document in a text editor, it makes no sense. But it's not quite plain text either. Plain text is just text, nothing else. Hypertext is written in plain text, but includes this markup, includes these HTML tags. The HTML tags are embedded in the document as kind of metadata that identifies features of the content and specifies how it should be organized and presented. That is what HTML does. The browser, when it sees HTML, will not show it to you. It will interpret it and change the look and structure and layout of the page accordingly. So it is text about text. It is text that tells the browser how to make other text do things, like be a link or be a paragraph or be a list or whatever. These tags don't belong to the document's content. They are instructions to the computer about how to display that content. Yeah?
So it doesn't make the browser as both compiler and executor?
In a sense, like it's not really compiled in the idea, or in the sense that a compiled program is turned into language that a CPU understands, so it's actually turned into machine code instructions. Instead, the browser has a program running, usually written in C or C++, that interprets that HTML and then knows how to render it on the screen. So it's more the interpreter and executor, right? Yeah, but close. JavaScript now is being compiled by browsers. So it's JavaScript that you write in plain text is being turned into machine code as you go inside of a browser, which is why it's getting really fast. Okay, the trick here is that we always start with plain text. Yeah, even if you're going to start writing HTML tags, you always want to have the content of your document in mind, the text and the tables and the information and the images that are going in it. Conceptually, that's where you start. Then you mark it up to accommodate that content. So HTML is composed of tags, as I've been saying, also known as elements. I will use those terms interchangeably. Tags can stand on their own. They can contain content, like text, and they can contain other tags. Every programming language that we learn, insofar as HTML is a programming language, has a syntax. We have to learn the syntax. It is a specified language that is determined in its meaning, and a computer can understand or interpret. So computers have a hard time understanding natural language because we can be so variable in how we speak. When we speak HTML, we speak it one way. We speak it the way it is specified in the HTML specification. And so what does HTML look like? What is the syntax for HTML? Most of you guys have probably already seen this, but basically we've got tags that are indicated by these characters. Our tag name goes between them, and then we'll have something, some kind of content, and then we close off that content with another set of those angle brackets and the forward slash, right? What are tags? You guys have all seen these. They're that simple. I have a paragraph tag. It's a P. So I stick it in those characters. I write out some text, and then I close the paragraph. That is what an HTML tag looks like. That's pretty straightforward, right? So has anybody not ever encountered HTML at all? Like never even seen it?
Well, I've seen it, but
Seen it?
never
Just like understood what's going on. So yeah, I mean it's hard not to be exposed to HTML at this point. I think if there's basic computer literacy, web pages is it. So beyond just learning how to write. Some tags are self-contained. So when we look at this structure for a tag, we see that we have the opening tag, content, and then the closing tag. Some HTML elements do not require a closing tag. Most do. There are a couple that do not. So notably, their structure just looks like this. Notably, the BR tag, which means a line break or a break in the page, is self-contained. We do not write BRR BRR. If you do that, your browser will probably be okay, but it's not legal HTML. All we need is this. That's it. It is a self-contained tag. Similarly, the input tag, which is much more common and we will learn how to use extensively, is self-contained. By itself, tags like this often don't tell you very much information. When we have a paragraph, we have content. And the browser knows to take that content and put it in a paragraph, or take a link and make it that link. The browser does not have any idea what to do with an input element. Well, what is an input element? Well, tags can also have attributes. And the attributes are often used with self-contained tags, but also with other tags, to give additional information about that element. So we'll show you how to do that in just a second. I forgot, I skipped ahead. There is another sort of tag that is not quite a tag, but is how we write comments inside of HTML. So almost every programming language supports the use of comments. Comments are just ways for us to write notes to ourselves. The browser ignores them. Feel free to write extensive comments. There are different philosophies about how much commenting you should use. But it looks like a tag. Starts with an exclamation mark, though, and then a dash and a dash. And then anything else that we include in that is the comment, and we close it with a dash and the same close symbol, right? So it's like it's kind of a tag. It's kind of a normal tag, but not. It's got that exclamation mark at the front of it. We'll use that for taking notes. Okay. So more importantly, back to tag attributes. So if this guy right here is the basic structure that we want to start from for our HTML tags, we can add these attribute equals quote value pairs to this thing, all right? And that adds information to the tag. So for example, we'll see that we have tag name, whatever it is, space, the name of the attribute, equal sign, and then in quotes, whatever we want its value to be. And then we close that, or we end the opening tag, we give it our content, and then we close the tag name. suppose I could write this on a computer inside of Sublime, but whatever. This is making sense, right? We can have attributes that are both required and attributes that are optional. So some tags do not work unless you give them an attribute. The specification tells us what they are. Other tags we can add attributes to and even create our own attributes for. We'll see that in just a second. An example of a tag that requires an attribute is the A tag. So the A tag is used for links or anchors, right? And so initially it stood for anchors. It's locations in a document that you can jump to, so they anchor a point in the document. They're also used for linking to other documents. How do we tell the A tag where to go? So if you do an A tag normally, and you give it some content like this is the link, we close the A, and I look at that inside of a web browser, this bit of text right here will appear blue and underlined usually. We click it. How does the web browser know where to go? We add an attribute to the A tag. We add the href attribute, which I suppose maybe stands for hypertext reference, and give it, in quotes again, a URL. So something like http://okcoders.com. In quotes, and then close the tag. And now whatever text we put in here, like OKCoders, will appear as a link that goes to this address. And we'll use an attribute value key pair for that. So I'll call those key pairs, or attribute names of values. And again, what this is we're learning the syntax. We're kind of learning some tags along the way, but really this is about understanding the broad outlines of HTML syntax. Make sense? We can have as many attributes as we want inside of a tag. We separate them with a space. That's it. So I could do tag, whatever, we'll call it a P, with attribute 1 equals some values in quotes, space, attribute 2 equals some values in quotes, space, attribute 3 equals some value in quotes, space, close it off, give it some content, and then close it off over here. So P, I guess, right? As many attributes as we want. Two commonly used attributes that you will often see appear together or as modifiers for tags in general are the ID attribute and the class attribute. The ID attribute, we'll learn when we talk about style sheets next week, is used to uniquely identify an element on the page. We can refer to it by its ID using our code. And then the class element assigns the tag to a category that is usually used to give it a particular style. And again, we'll learn more about that next week, but this is just a great example of two attributes that you see all over the place. So you might have something like P, ID equals name, class equals red, or whatever, and then your text, and you close the P, right? Totally legal, as many attributes as we want. We can, in addition to using attributes that are specified by HTML, that are required and that are optional, create our own attributes. We can just make them up. We can call them whatever we want. Generally, you want to prefix them with the word data and a dash. Then they will not conflict with attributes that already exist by their name or new attributes that are introduced into the HTML specification. So a sort of convention has arisen that we call them data whatever. And so you'll see, and if you look at web application code, stuff on Google or Twitter, on Facebook, you see this all the time. You'll see like a div, or I'll stick with a P, and then P data dash user equals, and then like a string of numbers. Right? And then you can imagine more content here, and close it off. I can then, in my code, use this attribute to refer to this this element on my page. That JavaScript is used exactly to do that. And so we're going to see how to do that in future lessons. So, but what I want you to be aware of right now is, in addition to required and optional attributes, we can define our own. Just prefix them with data dash. So. We have seen. Everybody got this? This is clear. Not really getting lost. It's pretty straightforward stuff, I think. Yeah. All right, clean this stuff up. so far we've seen that our HTML contains text content. So I got a paragraph, I give it some text. I have a div, I give it some text. I have an EM, I give it some text, whatever. HTML tags, elements, can also contain other HTML tags, other elements. And so we nest, this is what that's called, tags inside of tags to build up a complex document structure. And so I might take like a div tag, which is sort of a generic divider tag that sets off a section of my page. And inside my div tag, yeah, sure, I could give it some text, but I can also give it a paragraph tag, and then give that guy some text, and close the paragraph. And then give it another paragraph tag, give that guy some text, and then close the paragraph. And then maybe give it an image tag, who has a source attribute that tells me where that image is located, and that one is a self-contained tag. And then, after all that, I close my div.
What's div for again?
Generic division. So it's like it sets off a section of the page, but doesn't tell you anything else about it. Whereas a paragraph sets off a section of the page, but says, this is a paragraph. And I'll get into that distinction in a little bit here. So, probably about 10 or 15 minutes. The key trick right now, though, is that we can nest tags inside of tags. Tags contain content. Tags can be empty if they're self-contained, but tags can also contain other tags. This results in a structure that is called a tree. So then this is some computer science lingo. A tree is a kind of data structure that you use particular algorithms to traverse. But if you look at an HTML document, you'll see that it always starts with an HTML tag after the doc type declaration. And then you'll notice that there is always a head tag, that's awful handwriting, and then always a body tag, right? And then these are contained inside my HTML tag. And then inside my head tag, you'll often see a title tag, as well as a meta tag, as well as a link tag that might point to a style sheet. And these are all inside the head tag, which is inside the HTML tag, right? And then my body tag might have a div, and over here an image. And then inside that div, I'll have a P, and then some text. And then inside of each one of these P's, I have some text. But inside of this P, I've got some text, and then a link, and then some more text. And you can think of this as an upside-down tree, which starts at a root and then branches out into more complex structures. Yeah? And there are well-defined computing processes for dealing with these things, which every web browser uses. But this is the hierarchy of an HTML document. And you want to keep that in mind conceptually as you're creating your document. Yeah, basically, you're creating this kind of tree hierarchy, and we will indicate that to ourselves using spacing and indentation. So you'll be able to actually visualize the tree structure inside of your HTML document. So a little bit of theory there. Okay, so we've seen tags. We have a sense for what the HTML document looks like. What about actually creating an HTML document? So let's do that and see how every single HTML document has to begin. We do not have an index.html file. That's a great place to start. So let's make an index.html file. I'm going to do this from my command line using the touch command. So I'm going to create an empty index.html file. I want it to be in my public directory. So I'm going to say touch public / because it's a directory, no spaces, index.html. So to sort of expand that out a bit, it looks like that. Touch public / index.html. If I ls the public directory, remember we can use ls to see another directory, I should now see an index.html file in there. And, somewhat magically, if we look at our Sublime editor now, index.html appears in it. So I mentioned this in our last section, another reason why Sublime is awesome. Sublime actively is watching the folder that you initially opened with it, and then including any new files that you create in this list over here. Yeah?
What directory should it be?
I'm in whatever directory was that root directory we used when we created the Express application. Yeah, which we called static Express. So It's whatever directory will have these files in it. Is really what matters. Cool. Okay, blank index.html file. Let's make an HTML document. I said that we normally start with an HTML, and something else we'll notice here is that Sublime automatically recognizes this as an HTML document thanks to its file extension and starts to syntax highlight it, which is kind of nice. We'll need to open that HTML tag, and then we'll need to close that HTML tag. Okay, that's okay, I guess. Delete that. That's correct, but delete it. Sublime knows that this is an HTML document, right? So let's just type HTML, no angle brackets, nothing like that. I'm literally just typing HTML, and press the tab key. Sublime fills that in for me, because every time I create an HTML document, I have to write this stuff every single time. This is the basic structure of an HTML document. I have my HTML. Inside of the HTML, I have two what are called siblings in that tree. I have my head, and then I have my body. And then inside of my head, I have a title, right? Every single time we make an HTML document, we have to write this stuff by hand anyway. Let's use Sublime to do it automatically. Really, the final thing I need here, and it's too bad that Sublime doesn't do this automatically, is what's known as a doc type declaration. You can think of this as a self-contained tag that appears at the head of the document. Yeah?
Mine did that automatically.
Did it? You must have a new version of Sublime, so because that's really what it should do. Did anybody else get a doc type declaration automatically?
Sublime
Sublime Text 3 did it. Yeah. Okay.
tag automatically doc type HTML.
Yes, that's what it should do. So we're going to write it. We're going to do it manually here because I'm using an older version of Sublime. If you're on 3, sounds like it already does it. I'm going to add a tag, so we know the structure for a tag, those angle brackets, and then exclamation mark in capital letters doc type space lowercase html. What does that do? That is basically a way of telling the web browser that we are writing an HTML5 document. So there are other document types. There is HTML4, which is another specification of HTML, and then no, it does not. It's sort of conventionally so. You could write that by this as well. I think that actually looks nicer, but almost everywhere I see it, it's in capital letters. So.
Isn't the second HTML5 redundant after you told it it's HTML5?
No, I don't believe so. Every time I see this done, you still always start it with HTML. Does anybody else know? Maiwo, do you know? Can you leave that HTML tag off there? Okay. Well, okay. I mean, so the browser. So what'll happen is if you're not writing legal HTML, the browser will try to figure out what you mean. So we can find out. Actually, this is a great opportunity. You can leave it off. Let's find out. This is a great opportunity to introduce a service that I recommend all of you use whenever you're running into trouble, the HTML validator provided by the W3C. The W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium that determines specifications and standards for internet type stuff. And Tim Berners-Lee is on the board for that thing. Just Google HTML validator. It's the first thing that shows up, the W3C markup validation service. And what I want to do is validate by direct input. So this lets me copy-paste HTML. And it will tell me if anything is wrong with my HTML. So I'm going to take this sort of default template that I've got here, paste it in here, and go check. And the validator says, oops, something is wrong. Error found while checking this document. Element title must not be empty. My HTML has a mistake in it. So I could fill in a title. I could say, let's call it my home page because it's index.html. I'll copy that stuff and I'll paste it back into the validator. And then there should be a recheck here somewhere, revalidate. Now it goes, boom, perfect. So can we leave off the HTML? The validator will tell us. I have no idea. I have no idea, actually. So I'm going to delete that HTML there. I just did it right in there, but basically I've done this. I deleted that and I deleted that. And now let's revalidate this guy. Successfully checked his HTML5. Magic. So yes, you can leave the HTML off. By convention, everywhere I've ever seen anybody write HTML, they leave that on. But I think that's pretty cool. So, sweet. What's going on is that there is a specification. So that is what this is known in programming lingo. It is a document that tells you exactly what is legal to do inside of the programming language. And every program that interprets that programming language is written according to that specification. And so if we looked at the text of that specification, it would say, hey, you can either leave or not leave HTML in there. So we've included a link to that guy in the GitHub repository. So I am going to leave HTML in there almost by force of habit. Let's continue to modify this guy. So we have this index.html page that isn't really all that amazing right now. Let's add some text or HTML to our body. So one of the common tags to use is this H3 tag or header tag. You can do H1 through H6. It's levels of header, like how big that text will be generally. So I could do H3 and I could type, say, homepage, and then close it with H3. Make sure I'm getting my closing tags correct. If I don't, Sublime at some point will tell me that something is wrong. I don't know when it decides that to tell me that something is wrong. Eventually it will, like, syntax won't highlight correctly. Man, we typed a lot of text to get that working, right? Delete it. Type H3. Press tab. And so we get those tags auto-completed for us. Sublime will do this with every single tag. And then I can now type homepage right in there. So, and then, somewhat magically, if I type tab again, it will skip past that closing tag and put it at the end of the text. So now I'm just going to return down to the next thing. I think that's pretty awesome. So it's nice to know how to use your tools. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff in Sublime that I'm not taking advantage of. And then let's add a paragraph. And I'll just say, welcome. Again, so look at me. I'm doing it the old way. P, tab, welcome to my home page. Now, if we have put this file in the right place, if we've put it in our public directory and called it index.html, Express will now serve this file every time we go to our root directory for our web page. So every time we just go to localhost 3000 or go to localhost 3000/index.html, this is the file that will be given. We can test that by going to our browser. Make sure you have Express still running. I've got it running over here in the separate terminal window. If you don't have it running, npm start. Go over to Express, and lo and behold, I have a rather ugly home page. Welcome to my home page when I refresh my page. Or I can request explicitly /index.html, and it gives me the exact same thing. Everybody get that?
Did you save it?
I did save it. Yes, do save it. Yeah, so we save our changes, right.
So where did the welcome to Express?
Where did that go? So what happened? Express, when it sees that our public directory contains an index.html file, will simply serve it and then stop executing the rest of its code. If it doesn't see it, only then does the application get a chance to execute its other code, which results in that index.jade file being converted into HTML. And we'll learn more about that process in the coming weeks. So.
The start dot
npm start.
npm start. If I keep getting error, as in my command code, what is it?
Let's have a look at your error.
This will.
Possibly you do a PWD. Oh yeah, you're in your public directory. So
Okay,
yeah, so CD one directory up. Perfect. And now you should be able to do npm start. Bingo. Sweet.
Oh.
Yep.
No, it's still not here.
No, they're up there. So I mean, it's anything that you do below that.
Oh,
right?
I see.
Sweet.
I got a 404.
Got a 404. What page are you going to?
Index.html.
We can check. Let's take a. All right. So let's take a break. We're an hour into class. I'm gonna help you out over there. Yeah. Inside the public directory. All right. So break time. There might even be some food, although they didn't say how they were going to serve it. But feel free to take 5 or 10, and then we'll come back and let's figure out some of the problems that are going on.
Good time for a break.
Your server. Yeah. So when you make changes to your phone, like I have to restart the application because it's still thinking previous.
Explains why.
Yeah.
Do you know how to zoom in Sublime?
How to zoom? So I'm making make my text bigger like that.
Yeah.
Command and then the plus key on a Mac. It should be similar on a Windows. Control plus or something like that. Did that work? Yeah.
Cool. That's fine. I just want to know where you are. So
I mean, basically, where we were.
alright, so just to know where you are in your terminal, that's like one. So you can always go WD, right? That means you're just in your home. So you go ahead. So now when I did PWD, it told me where you were. Right. So then type LS. And that's right. So we know it's going to zero. And then LS is here. So then really good. You have Nomad, which is like I guess we make it. And you have to add my products over there. Just go ahead and remove your comments. Space, NPM, so, well, because it's a zero form, it happens when you incorrectly use NPM. So, where do you want to start? You want to create a new project? Right. So, when you want to create a new project, you create a folder for a directory. So, say mkdir, which is like the same directory, right? And then call it whatever you want. You can call it test them, whatever. So now that directory is created, right? So now when you go into that directory and actually do Express, right? That's Express. Exactly. Now we create a folder. Express. So now in there, press LS. It's empty. That's exactly what it says, right? Now it's actually bootstrapping out for the base code generated for us. Express to generate that.
This is so that's
That's actually going to create the base file, right? The foundation of your application. Go ahead and get that. That's there, right? So now, if you see another one, so the CD dot is like right? So you don't need to do that part because that actually is what installs the dependencies, things that your product depends on. So these are guys created. We haven't created all these things for you. We created them, but it actually installed this dependency. It does that for you. That's the next step done. So it's all right. We're good. Do it fast. See all those folders? And then you see that node module folder. When you do that, it's going to LS. So that's what's in that node module. Created on this. Like you want to do this speed down by yourself, right? You want to have a program. Now we want to open this text editor and edit some files, right? So this is going to type out OP. Yeah, this is a real space. Yeah, no, that's good. So now we know where it's like super easy to Sublime. And click on file. Open. And then we're going to find it, right? So Okay, so I know snake. Okay, let me show you.
I guess I think that's all I'm
Alright, so what shit that I used to do, so like, and this is what I do. And I'll make myself famous. There'll be lots of famous notes. So now it was trying to find that file. Then we have to find it. Well, that's iteration stuff is nice. So, oh, it's right there. Whereas other later, Ruby does it for so like Python has HTML. So now we have the part, right? So when you actually request a page, right? So like and like index goes in that's just like a dating. So if you go back into your terminal, you can actually click on yeah, click over on the index. That's what it is. Just on this. Let's actually go back to our command practice everywhere. All that. Yeah. I mean, I know this is actually. You can't that's fine. And then now we're going to actually launch. Let's actually start that. We're actually get it running with npm start. Well, no, you did more than that. Yeah, so it's like that. Do you have a website? You're going to get one? At all. Right. Not true. Most of them. They were actually having a spot because that's where there's a build button that is well, so it doesn't work. Oh wait.
All right. Let's keep going. Let's mark up some HTML, or let's mark up some text. So we're going to do something practical. We're going to introduce a couple of HTML elements. I am not going to go over all of the HTML elements. I'm going to leave that to you guys. That stuff is easy. So there's a reference up on the web page. It's the exact same document where I list off the basic HTML elements, and then I give you links for more advanced HTML elements. That's really not what's important. What's important is understanding how this stuff works, how this stuff fits together. An HTML tag is just a letter and some brackets and some contents, right? And there's 100 of them. I don't even know them all. So I'm going to leave that to you guys for homework, and that is your homework. We want to understand more like what the underpinnings, the foundation stuff. But before we do something a little more theoretical, let's go ahead and mark something up so we get a sense of what that involves. So let's take our page that we've got here and delete it. So I'm just going to delete the stuff in my body. I'm going to leave everything else. Go ahead and save it. Sublime will go, hey, you should pay for me. And let's find Tim Berners-Lee. So Google Tim Berners-Lee. He spells his name with a dash at the end. He might be European. He's British. sort of half European. It's true. They're not quite sure. And look at his Wikipedia page. Look at that handsome man. This guy changed the world, more so than Page or Brin or Facebook or anything. So he was hanging out at CERN. All right, so you've got some text and an image here. Let's just copy this text from Wikipedia. Thankfully, it's Creative Commons. And I'm going to get some junk in there. I just really want this text over here and then that guy. So let's copy these paragraphs first so I don't get all that other junk. So I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to paste it into my browser or into my Sublime over here. And, you know, it's pretty gnarly. I get a bunch of paragraphs. And then let's grab the heading here as well. Copy that and paste it at the top of my document. It's all going inside my body, right? And it's nice and formatted in my document, so I've got some spacing. I've got line breaks. Let me go ahead and tab these things out, so excuse me, so they line up nicely. So yeah, it doesn't look too bad, right? Let's even get this from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia thing, and stick it right under Tim Berners-Lee. This is plain text. This is what I mean when I talk about plain text. I can open this up and look at it, and I can read this just fine. I obviously see where the paragraphs are. I obviously see what a heading is. We don't really need any other information. Ensure that we are still running Node. So if you're not still running Node, make sure you do npm start somewhere. But if you've got it open in another window, you should still be running it. And go to your web browser, to your localhost 3000, and refresh the page. So what happened? All of this text that we have nice and laid out in our plain text file here, sort of the body for our HTML, is just mashed together into one single line. So you can like refresh, you can grow this window, whatever. It's one single big, huge line of text. White space in an HTML document does not mean anything inside of the text content anyway. It is used to distinguish attributes from one another and stuff like that. But as far as the text content goes, HTML ignores all white space, including new lines and tabs. So a new line is like when you press the return key, and will elide or compress more than one white space character into a single white space character. And so I'm talking about like space bars and stuff like that. What do I mean exactly? Well, see how I've got I've obviously got a new line here, so I've pressed the return key. I'm going to press the return key as many times as I want. And when I save it and refresh my page, it's the exact same thing. It is ignoring every single one of those return keys. So I'll back that up. I'm going to go, okay, from Wikipedia, actually let me put a whole bunch of spaces between Tim and Berners-Lee. So at least it'll show that, right? I'm going to go, I save it, refresh my page. No, still only a single space between Tim and Berners. That is how HTML handles white space. Space that is not a letter or a character or anything else. So that's space bars, tabs, returns, and a couple of other things. It takes all of those, however many I have in a row, and makes them a single one when it renders it. That is according to the HTML specification. It is doing what it is supposed to do. If we want this to appear any other way, we must use markup. We have to mark up our document with HTML. So let's do that. Let's make this look like the Tim Berners Wikipedia page. So we've obviously got sort of a header here, so let's try one of these H things. So I'm going to do the H1 tag, and I'm going to surround it, surround the Tim Berners-Lee with that. Because remember, that's how tags work, right? Refresh my page, or save it, and refresh my page, and it should automatically show up. Boom, now we're getting somewhere, right? Maybe that's a little too big. Well, we can choose between H1 and H6, so let's try H3, somewhere in between. And let's make sure that we get our closing tag to match it. They're both H3s. Refresh. Okay, that's not bad. If we compare it to the page over here, it's maybe a little bit smaller, but it's not quite as big. So let's take a middle ground and do H2. Again, we just getting practice here, right? Save and refresh. That looks pretty good. There is a line that runs all the way across the page, immediately under his name there. We're going to use a HR for that, which stands for a horizontal rule. It's a tag that is not really used all that often anymore, and we'll learn better ways to do this. But basically, let's put an HR underneath that. And I can put that anywhere. And remember, white space is ignored. So I could stick it over here, I could stick it over here, I could stick it over here. It's not going to matter. But we want to reveal the structure of our document with white space, because we can use the white space to do whatever we want, and don't worry about the browser interpreting it. And so I'm going to use tabs intelligently. I'm going to use white space and new lines and return keys intelligently, so I can visually inspect the structure, the hierarchy of my document at a glance. So I save and refresh, and now we've got that horizontal rule running across the page. We've got this from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. Well, I guess these are all paragraphs, so let's go ahead and make them paragraphs. So around each one of these things, add an opening p tag and a closing p tag. Just around each one of those. Opening p tag, closing p tag, and you'll see Sublime kind of wanting to auto indent for me. I'm going to ignore that. Closing p tag, opening p tag, closing p tag. Okay. These are the most simple HTML tags that we can think of. Save it and refresh your page. Now we're starting to look a little bit more like how Wikipedia's got it. Close that guy. All right. If we look at this again, Sir Timothy John, or Tim Berners-Lee, is in bold. This is known as emphasizing text. They're probably using the strong tag to do this, so let's give that a shot. In the past, you might have seen people use the B tag. That tag is deprecated, which means it is no longer used and will eventually be ignored by web browsers. So let's use the strong tag. So around the Sir Timothy John, Tim Berners-Lee, we'll add strong. Like that. Save it and refresh the page. Oop. Oop. There we go. Something along those lines. Look at this thing one more time. We've got a whole bunch of URLs here. I'm just going to pick one. Bottom of the second paragraph, MIT Center for Collective Intelligence. Okay, that sounds pretty awesome. Actually, that does sound pretty awesome. Control-click on that, or right-click on a Windows PC. And you should see an option somewhere where it says like copy link address. I think it'll show that on Windows as well. We basically want to copy the URL. Okay. Go back to my HTML document. If we got that, we can paste it in here and we should see it. So it's a URL to a Wikipedia page. Let's take this text, MIT Center for Collective Intelligence, and turn it into a link to that page. That's what we're doing. So around that text, first thing I need to do is get an A tag. So I'm going to do like that. So I just included those A tags there. If I were to look at this right now, so I can save it and refresh it, you'll see it's not showing up as a link, right? And we see this stuff in there because I pasted it in there. But where'd this guy go? How come that's not showing up as a link? Because we have not specified the href attribute. The browser doesn't know to treat it as a link. So I do a space href, which Sublime nicely highlights for me. And then again, our attribute value pairs are always name equals, and then in quotes, whatever the value is. And notice that Sublime auto-completes those quotes. Then I'll just stick that URL inside of that. And again, we get a lovely bit of syntax highlighting. Save it, and refresh the page. So now we've got a link. We have hypertext. And we can click on it and go to the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence. Man, that sounds badass. All right. Starting to look pretty good, pretty good. Let's put this image inside of our page. And so again, we can click on the Tim Berners-Lee here image, and we see his lovely face. Very handsome man. And we get the actual link for the image up here. So I think we can just like use that link. Copy that URL there. And let's be sure that's the case. No, not really. That's Wikipedia doing some magic. So instead, again, right-click or control-click on that picture and go over to copy link address or whatever it is on Windows.
Copy image URL.
Copy image URL, thank you. That's what we really want. Okay, so we don't know exactly where that'll go. We're just going to stick it wherever. Let's stick it up here. Let's stick it, I don't know, right above the H2. Now let's stick it right below the H2, below the HR, below the Wikipedia as well. We'll do it above the first paragraph. Doesn't really matter. So it's the image tag. An image tag is a self-contained tag. It has no closing tag, but it does have a source attribute. So source equals, in quotes, the URL that we just copied. Save it and refresh the page. And I have a broken image link. Did everybody else get a broken image link? Anybody? So some people got.
They do a copy image URL instead of image.
Oh, thank you. I was copying the link address. Good call. Copy image URL. You even said that. There we go. All right. Refresh and boom, Tim Berners-Lee. Right? That's not exactly where we want it. There is a now deprecated attribute for images that we will go ahead and use just to show you how this works. But normally we will not use this. It is no longer in use. There are other ways to do this, but it's the align attribute. So remember that we can have more than one attribute. So just a space after that source equals in the text. I can say align equals and put it in quotes right. Don't do this in the future, but that's our little cheat for now. Refresh, and my image gets put over there. So it's not perfect. It's not bad either, right?
Go back to your image.
Yeah, it's this guy right here. This is just practice working with HTML. So these are some of the tags that we'll use. This is this sort of a process of taking plain text and marking it up so that we end with an HTML document, right? There's a lot more that we could do here. There are many more HTML tags that we could use. Please review the GitHub documentation where I've included an HTML reference and pointed you at other sources for HTML tags. As we continue working in the class, we will continue learning new HTML tags. But I'm not just going to dump a whole bunch of HTML tags at you right now. That would be kind of pointless. So.
HR?
Yeah.
How did you manage to get your picture to sort of resize to smaller?
I didn't do anything.
Well, and you got the URL for the thumbnail.
For the small image. Okay, right. 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 If you clicked on it first and then grabbed the URL, that would be the bigger image. There are. We will learn that when we learn CSS starting next week, that there are ways to handle all of that stuff. We can control basically exactly how our page will appear using cascading style sheets, CSS. And that will be the next thing that we learn next week. So, okay, let's put this on the internet. Let's deploy this thing. So we have a public.html page. We have a Tim Berners-Lee fan page. You should send them an email. This is all made possible by Tim Berners-Lee and your friends at the W3C. Okay, so have I already initialized a Git repository? I can't even remember, so let's do git status to find out. Looks like I have. Everybody got a Git repository? Git status says, and make sure we're in our root directory, right? So this is the directory that contains our main node application. Should have these files in it. All right, so we're going to do git add dot, so for adding that file that we just changed. And anything else, really. And then we'll do git commit -m, added Tim to index.html, or on a first name basis. I've had him over for drinks. He's a lush. He's British. He likes gin. I like gin. We'll get along. That's it.
Where does what we're putting in quotes? Where is that stored? That's just
internally. What happens is it gets put inside of that .git directory that's hidden,
So then it just appends it to the end.
Well, what we're gonna discover is there's a way to view our entire history by the person who has made those changes, and then you can see who's changing what inside of a project. But we'll learn that further down the road. So it gets pretty awesome. We're gonna talk a little bit about it at the end of class here. Not yet. So we can't push it yet because we don't actually have a Heroku application associated with this project, right? So let's prep it for Heroku. There are two things we need to do that. First, we need to create that proc file that Heroku wants, right? So let's go ahead and touch our proc file. Sounds so strange to say that every single time, but do it. We can confirm that we have a proc file with our ls command. There it is right there. And let's use that lovely echo with redirection command to add some text to our proc file. Remember, we got to get we got to get this just right. So we echo in quotes web:// bin www. Close quotes. I'm sorry, that is incorrect. web:/node space bin www, and I'm missing a / there as well. Man. Okay, sorry. So that's what it is right there. Everybody see that? Echo quotes web:/node space bin /www. And that actually exists, right? That's talking about this thing. There's a file in there, www. That's what it's referring to. Redirection with the two greater than symbols into our proc file. And again, that looks like that.
So if you didn't do the redirection, do you have to type the whole line again?
You can press the up arrow key.
Right.
And then you can add the rest of it to it at the end of it. Nice little shortcut.
Yes.
All right. Confirm that we got that in the right place. We could call head on our proc file. And it should look like that. So that's looking pretty good. Well, we just created another file that's not in our Git repository, so let's add it to our repository. Git will tell me that again with git status. It goes, hey, you got a proc file. Want to add it? We go, yes, we do. So we git add. We can either add it by name, which is what I'm doing this time, or we can use the dot symbol. And then again, git commit with the m flag. And in quotes, whatever you want to say, but I'll say added proc file. Now we are ready to create our Heroku application and push it to Heroku. Everybody get this far? Yes?
Sorry, I missed the part where you put in www, the dot in.
Looks like that. Okay. So, how do we create a Heroku application? We type Heroku create. Heroku should say that worked. At some point, you will reach your maximum of 5 allowed Heroku applications without putting a credit card on Heroku. You may do one of two things when that happens. You may delete some of your old applications from your Heroku dashboard. So if you just go to heroku.com, it'll automatically take you to your dashboard. And you can, real quick, you can delete one of these things. Yes? That's right. Or you can stick a credit card in Heroku. They won't bill you until you do some other stuff. So.
What was the Heroku create?
Yes. And the command, who's got it for sticking this up on Heroku? Git push Heroku master. So git space push space Heroku space master. And that should stick it up on the internet. Ultimately, we should get something along the lines of launching done, yada, yada, yada. And again, the command for that was git push Heroku master. This will make sense in a little bit. It'll make a little bit more sense anyway. It'll make complete sense probably by the end of next week. And we can do Heroku Open to open our application. Boom, Tim Berners-Lee hanging out on the internet.
So does that command Heroku Open, does it just know off your working directory which one to open?
Yes, that's right. And so I believe what is happening is if we look at the files inside of our Git directory, inside of that hidden.git folder, you will see inside of the config folder, actually that's a file, so I can edit it. So if I cat my .git/config, there's some stuff in here, and boom, Heroku adds a little piece of information to that file when you do Heroku create, and then it refers to that piece of information from that point on anytime you give a Heroku command in that directory. So that's Git configuration. We're not going to get into that, but that's the gist of what's going on there.
So then if you created the Heroku app before actually making the Git repository,
I think
initializing it would...
Heroku might give you an error. Heroku might tell you that you need to create a Git repository first.
Oh, okay.
That would be my guess.
It does.
Yeah.
I
Just tried that? Yeah. Have we had success? Are these things uploaded? We got this working? Success? Yes, sweet. Awesome. All right. I'll give Maiwo a second here. So this is pretty awesome. We're making this is progress, right? So basically, I mean, we're getting used to deploying at this point. We've learned how to do some static HTML. For homework, you're going to make 5 HTML pages and push them up to Heroku, so you get practice deploying again. Basically, we're going to practice doing this every single time as we learn all the material for the course, right? That stuff is crazy. I'm going to give it just a second longer because I'm going to talk about some theoretical stuff. Not for very long, only for about 5 or 10 minutes here, and then I'm going to go over Git a little bit, and then we'll wrap up class. We might run 5 or 10 minutes over. Is that all right?
Yes.
Normally, we're really going to try hard to keep it at 2 hours. I don't want to keep you guys later.
We started a bit late today.
We started a little late, yeah. So normally we'll figure this out. We'll get good at this. And plus, I have no idea. Like I make this stuff up and then hope it's 2 hours, right? So. Seriously. So.
Test run at home?
What's that?
Can you do a test run at home with the mirror?
No, not for 2 hours. I get it memorized. Yeah, I keep my notes up here just in case. But stuff is a book. It's crazy how much I write for this stuff. So, all right. So let's go into a little bit of theory here. We'll get caught up here. There are 2 things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about the difference between structure and presentation in HTML. This is super theoretical, and we won't really encounter this distinction until we learn CSS. But the gist of it is that HTML5 distinguishes between the structure of your document and what it looks like, its presentation. That is, tags are meant to be semantic rather than stylistic. And by semantic, all we mean is that a tag identifies what a piece of content in your document is or what it does, what its function is. It does not determine what that piece of content looks like. Okay? That is not what HTML is for. HTML is not to make your document look like something. HTML is to identify pieces of information in your document. HTML is metadata. It is information about your content. And so what I mean by that, a really concrete example, we use the P tag for a paragraph when we want to identify a bit of text as a paragraph, because that is what that text is. It's a paragraph. We do not use the P tag because we want to have some text with some nice spacing around it. Okay. A tougher example, I think, it's all right, is using the strong tag. Oh,
sorry.
No, you got a moment of excitement, though, right? We use the strong tag not to make text bold in the browser, even though that's what it does every single time, which is really awful because that's confusing. We use the strong tag to say, hey, this is important text. Browser, you do whatever you want to indicate that it's important. I'm just telling you that it's important. That is the semantic definition of HTML, the functional definition of HTML, rather than the presentational or stylistic definition. Back in the day, 5 years ago, when we had HTML4 and when we had XHTML, that was not the case. HTML4 did not make that distinction. And so we have a whole bunch of tags that are for presentation, like the B tag, the I tag, the HR tag, the BR tag. Those don't really have any function. They are entirely presentational. HTML5 deprecates, is the technical term for this, deprecates or marks those bits of tags as no longer acceptable and says, hey, do it differently. We are doing it differently from now on. The problem is, though, that some of these tags, as we've seen, come with a very distinct look. Strong is always bold, and EM is always italics. That is arbitrary in a sense. Browsers apply a default styling to HTML tags, but that styling differs from browser to browser. Some browsers use a different default font or default font size. Some browsers have a slightly different blue for the links. Some browsers may not even be underlining them anymore. Some browsers might use varying degrees of bold to make something strong, and so on. We cannot rely on the stylistic properties of a tag unless we have defined them ourselves. And we define them ourselves using CSS, not HTML. And so HTML5 makes a very strong conceptual distinction between semantics or function and style or presentation. And we want to keep that distinction in mind. Good HTML is HTML that follows that distinction. And what we'll learn, if we are correctly following that distinction, is that we can write very complex HTML, give it one completely unique layout, make it appear entirely one way on our screen, and then without changing a single line of our HTML, make it look completely different. Because we are practicing the distinction between structure and presentation. So we will write HTML, we will leave our HTML alone, and then we will change our CSS. We will change our style sheets, which we'll learn about next week, and we will get a completely different web page. An example of this is zengardencss.com, or something along those lines, csszengarden.com. This is the exact same HTML every single time. The HTML does not change. Somebody is simply rewriting the CSS. Same exact HTML. Even though things appear in different places on the page, HTML does not tell you where a thing goes on the page. This will trip you up because you think, oh yeah, it's a hierarchy, so this title has to be within that head, both conceptually and in terms of its presentation. That is not the case. You can use presentation to stick this tile thing inside the body or wherever, right? Maybe not exactly that example. But the gist of it is that we cannot rely on HTML to determine what a page looks like. We use CSS for that. And it is incredible what you can do with CSS, as we will learn. I am consistently astonished by the beauty of things that people are making with CSS. So, right? But we keep our HTML the same. That's an important theoretical distinction that I won't harp on, but let's be careful with it. So. Maybe the more important theoretical distinction that has practical significance immediately is that in general, and I'll actually just pull this up on here so you can see this. In general, CSS tags are either inline or block level. That is the sort of the category that they belong to. In some cases, they're mixed, or you can mix them yourself using CSS. I'm sorry, not CSS tags. HTML tags are either block or inline, and sometimes you can mix those. What is the difference? So a block level element will appear to occupy the entire horizontal space in a browser, even if it doesn't require all of that space. It blocks off the content that it contains and pushes everything around it, above it, and below it. So if I have one block element that only needs half of the browser's page, and another block element that immediately follows it, or even not a block element, it won't matter, that also only uses half of the browser's page, they will not appear side by side. The first block element will say, nope, I am occupying all of this space, even though I don't need all of it, and the next one, you got to get pushed down. That is what a block level element does. It blocks off content in an HTML document. The P tag, the div tag, the H1 tag, the UL tag, these are all block level elements. And inside of the HTML reference that I've given you, there is identify what kind of what kind of tag it is. Like I say, H1 is a block level, and I also give you links to block level and the other one, inline elements. So be aware of these. This is more important maybe than understanding the theoretical distinction that we just talked about. It's more important practically. The opposite of a block level tag is an inline tag. An inline tag just renders in line with the rest of its content. So if I start a bunch of text and I give it a EM tag, say, and then I put some text in that, and I close my EM tag and I give it some more text, this bit right here will render on the same line as the surrounding content. It will not push it up and down. If I have a bunch of text, and in the middle of that text I give it a paragraph, the thing that's inside of the paragraph will now appear on its own line over here, and then this bit of text will get pushed down below it. That is the effect of a block level element versus an inline level element. We need to be aware of which one is which when we are writing HTML, because if we don't have them distinguished, our web pages will not look the way we think they should look. And when we try to do certain things to those elements using CSS, it won't work correctly because some CSS only works with block level elements. We'll learn about that next week. Also importantly, the relationship between block elements and line elements is somewhat confusing. It starts off easy. Block level elements can contain other block level elements and inline elements. So my div, as I've got an example here, is a block level element. It can contain a P, which is a block level element. And it can also contain an A, an anchor, which is an inline level element. Doesn't matter. Block level element will take either. An inline level element can only take inline level elements, other inline level elements. And you can nest those as deeply as you want. So you can see that I've got a strong, which contains an EM, which contains an anchor, so that the link will be a strong emphasized link to Google, and then I have to close those in order, which I actually don't. I forgot the closing A tag. I'll fix that. But then I close the EM and I close the strong. That is legal. But I cannot put a P or a div or an H1 inside any single one of those tags. That is not legal HTML. When you do that, your browser will fail gracefully. So the browser will go, okay, I'm not supposed to be able to do that, but I'm going to try to figure it out. And it might get exactly the effect that you're going for, or it might give you something entirely unexpected. And you'll be like, why is my HTML not working? The reason is because you are not writing legal HTML. You have put a block level element inside of an inline level element. Use the markup validation service when you are not sure. I still get this stuff confused. I think it's bizarre. Sometimes it's not entirely clear which one is which or why. Probably the most confusing one is the image, which is an inline level element, although you would think it should be a block level. The effect of that, let me show you real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. I've got this image here on my page. Don't worry about doing this in your code. I'm just going to do it real quick. And it's hanging out over there. I'm going to get rid of this align right property. Now it appears at the top. And you think, oh, yeah, that's block level, right? No, it's not. The reason it appears that way is because the paragraph above it and the paragraph below it are block level. And so they're pushing that image or squeezing it in between them. But what if I take this image and stick it in that paragraph? Like that, which is legal. Paragraph is a block level, image is a inline level, and I refresh it. Still kind of looks like it's block level, but it actually isn't. This line of text now occupies this entire height. So the line height for this line has been expanded to accommodate the height of this image, and this image is actually rendering in line with the rest of this text. That is bizarre behavior. I think that is counterintuitive to the extreme, but it is the case. Which means that if I take that image and stick it in the middle of this text somewhere and refresh my page, that is where it's going to appear, and it's going to require that entire line height and be rendered in line with the rest of that stuff. That is the kind of bizarre behavior you get if you are not correctly combining these elements. Yeah? And you're just going to be like, why is that happening? Maybe that was one of Tim Berners-Lee's mistakes, of the very few that he had. So I know, right? Blasphemous, blasphemous. What makes this worse? So that's almost harmless compared to the next thing. I said that block level elements can contain other block level elements. A div can contain a paragraph. They're both block level elements. Not every block level element can contain every other block level element. A div can contain a paragraph, but a paragraph cannot contain a div. Hold on a sec. I have no idea why that's the case. These are simply the HTML specifications. I have no good sense for what these rules, for what the exceptions are. You learn them from experience, and you learn them from validating your HTML. And so I just want you to be aware of that, because you're going to encounter this. You're going to encounter HTML that does not render correctly, and this is going to be one of the reasons why. So it's sort of keep an eye out for this when you have a bug. Yeah?
I have an idea of why it might not work.
Okay.
It could be the parent-child class relationship, and that you were trying to call a child class as a superclass, such as calling a div into a paragraph, which could be a syntax error, and it could be an out-of-order error.
Well, you can write it so you get your syntax order correct, though. Like you can close your div before you close your paragraph, right?
But I'm saying the reason why that could be is because could be that paragraph is a child class of div.
Okay. Like inside of the code that's rendering the HTML.
That could be it.
I think it's bizarre. Somewhere the hierarchy is. Maiwa's got something.
Yeah.
No.
This has something to do with the product files. It's weird.
Okay. You're still working on that?
Yeah, I got it fixed. But
okay.
It's for everybody else later.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, I've got only 5. So let's 5 or 10 more minutes is okay.
Yes.
So pause. Okay. So that's all the theoretical stuff. Any questions? Good. So all I want to do for the last few minutes here, I was kind of hoping to have a little bit more time for this, but we'll work our way through this slowly because we're going to use it the whole time. What in the world is this git thing that we're using, right? I'm having you type these git commands all the time, and you're just like, okay, I'm just going to type these git commands, but I don't quite really get what's going on. Let me explain a little bit about how git works and what some of these commands do so that you kind of have a frame of reference, so that it doesn't seem so foreign, and then we will continue to learn exactly what git is doing the entire time. Git, and again, I pointed you at that book. Please read that book. That has the best conceptual explanation of what Git does of any book, and it's like 10 pages. So it's incredible. Git is a version control system. So the gist is, every time we change our file, rather than overwriting our previous version of that file, Git saves it. And we can do that for infinitely many files as we want, and for infinitely changes as we want. So every time I add a line of text, every time I delete and add a line of text, every time I delete 50 lines of text, every time I create a new file, every time I add an image, anything, Git keeps track of that fact and then lets me undo those changes as far back as I want, which is pretty awesome. It is version control. And so you can imagine you were writing that document when you were a student in college, and it was your 50-page research thesis, and then you accidentally pressed the delete key after your cat jumped on the keyboard, and it deleted half of it, and then your computer shut down because the battery was low before you could save it. That thing is now gone, not recoverable, unless maybe some contemporary technologies make it possible. Git, if you had been committing it, has saved it inside of the repository, and with a single line of command, you can bring it back up. That is what Git lets us do. In addition, Git allows more than one person to work on the same file at the same time, and it will keep track of who is making what changes. And then when you share that on a place like GitHub, which is a place to upload your Git repositories, it will tell you through this history every change that you have made to the file and who is making those changes. So basically, you can see me putting this thing together today. Those tags that we're adding every time are recorded, and GitHub is showing them for me and noting that I'm the person who did it. And then if I look at this thing and I go, okay, what was going on here? I can click to see that history, and there it is. This is the line of code that I changed. Git thinks that I deleted one line and added another. I made a small modification. I added a C. But the way Git thinks of is in terms of lines. So it sees that I deleted a line and added another one. This is what Git is doing in the background. Heroku works with Git. And so we're using Git for the most part locally on our machines. So we're creating repositories, adding files to them, removing the files. But then we can upload those repositories to sites on the internet using a remote repository. So again, that terminology, right? Local is our machine, remote is some server somewhere. GitHub is a remote repository for our local repositories. Heroku is just another remote repository for our local repositories. And it turns out that we can have as many remote repositories associated with our local repository that we want, and we can decide when we want to push to which one, or upload to which one. We're basically uploading. And then what's wild is I could upload it to the remote repository, somebody else could make a change, upload their changes to the remote repository, so now we have two different versions of the same repository. Well, I can download his changes, it will automatically update all of my stuff to include his changes, and then write my changes on top of it, so that I can then upload my stuff back to there without losing the stuff that he added. So Git is pretty freaking awesome. And we are going to learn how to use it, and we're going to get in the habit, more importantly, of using it. Because nothing sucks like writing thousands of lines of code only to have that noob programmer come in and wreck it all for you. So, and that'll be you guys when you get a job, right? So we want to learn how to do this. Basic Git command. So real quick, so great, we're only at 8:03. I'm just going to run through a couple of these in an entirely different context. So, so I'm not even going to worry about making a web application. I'm going to go ahead and kill everything that I've got here. So this is not about Node, this is just about Git. I'm just going to make a Git example directory, cd into it. So I'm in an empty directory, right? Basic Git commands. The most basic Git command is Git by itself. So if I type Git, Git will tell me what I can do. That's pretty nice. It's like, here's probably what you want to do. Here's some details about the path. So it's like a miniature man version for Git, right? But the gist of it is, this is the important stuff. It talks about working locally, like adding files or committing files. It talks about working remotely, like pushing and pulling. But it also talks about branches, branch and checkout, which we'll learn about in a couple of classes. Branches allow me to make modifications to the same files at the same time and keep both of those modifications in different branches. And then I can switch back and forth between those branches to view my changes in the running application or in the web browser, and then decide which one I want to keep. So it's like I can make changes without ever having to worry about losing them and without having to decide which ones I want. I'm in some kind of weird quantum state.
Which one is that?
That's the branch and commits. That's chapter 3 in that Git book that I pointed you guys out at. That stuff's a little more advanced. Feel free to read ahead. But we're going to cover it in the coming weeks. Yeah?
There's a website, TryGit, it's an interactive.
Oh, cool.
Actually, like, try to do commands.
You're what?
Try Git.
Looks like try.github.com.
Yeah, that's it.
So that's awesome. Because GitHub does, and Git does take a little bit to learn. It took me a while to learn for sure. Good place to practice without having to worry about wrecking your file system. So. Okay, so what else can we do? So what are the things that we've mostly been doing? So typically we initialize a repository. So that command is git init. The git command works by passing subcommands to it, right? And so I'm calling the git command and passing it the init subcommand. I created a repository. What that does is create this directory, this hidden .git directory, which contains a whole bunch of stuff. And it is in here that all of my messages, all of my commits, all of my changes, everything I do, all of that configuration information gets stored in here, and that's being done by the git command every time I call it, right? So it's modifying stuff in here. Every single change I make gets stored in here somewhere, probably under branches, and then when I undo changes or switch back and forth, Git will intelligently pull the changes out of this hidden directory and put them in my main directory, and then go back and forth between the two. So it's like it's managing its own special set of files for me. Git will let me know what's up anytime I want, as we've seen with the git status command. And it tells me that I'm on branch master. Master is always the main branch that we work on. Again, we'll learn more about this. And then I'm at my initial commit, haven't done anything yet. So if I want to start working with files in my repository, I can create something. I'll create an empty file. I'll just call it fill.txt. That file is empty. So if I do git status, it looks like Git sees it. Sometimes Git doesn't add empty stuff. Git does not add empty folders, so be careful with that. But let's go ahead and add this to my repository. I use the add command. I can either name it explicitly, like fill.text, or I can use dot to recursively add everything in this directory. And then I'll commit. git commit -m with the message Phil's text file. Phil's text Phil, huh? So funny. Okay, I know. All right, and there we go. It has been committed to my repository, so happy days. Now I can modify this file. So I'm going to use, I'll just echo something into fill.text. I'm going to use my handy redirection there, the 2 greater than symbols, to put it into fill.text. And now I can see that I have something in fill.text. So nothing too crazy. Again, I can use get status to let me know what's up. It says I've modified fill.text. I know that. So I want to commit it. If I just go to commit it directly, so I modified fill.text, the commit message goes, hey, wait a minute, you have changes that are not staged for commit. I think this is probably one of the more confusing aspects of Git. Git, and we talked about this last time just a tiny bit. Git uses a 2-stage process for all of your file changes. So you can imagine I've got my working directory, and I make a bunch of edits to my files, right? And I got my repository hanging out over here. And I want to get these changes into my repository, right? I want to save them. First thing I need to do is add those changes to the index. So I use the add command. And that goes into what's called the staging area. You don't have to worry about these names. Mostly I just want you to get the fact that it's a 2-step process. And then that goes, okay, so I add, maybe say I select this file, these 2 files. Those are the only ones I want to add. So those go into my staging area. And Git knows, now, next time I commit these 2 files and their changes to my repository. So then I do my commit command. And that seems counterintuitive. You might say, well, why can't I just commit directly? This gives me control over which files I'm committing at which time. So it lets me save some files but not save others to the repository. So for example, I could have my Heroku application. I could change 20 files. I'm in the middle of some big change process. And then somebody calls me up and says, hey, we got a bug. Can you fix it? And it's only in some other file that I haven't touched yet. So I go over, I grab that file, I make changes, and then without committing anything else, this is not really the way you would do it, but as an example, I would add that one file, and then when I commit, I'm only committing that one file. So now when I push my repository, all of this other stuff that I've changed doesn't get pushed with it. Only the one file that I told it to do. So we have this 2-stage process, add and commit, which I think is slightly counterintuitive, but makes sense in the long run. So I add that file. There are shortcuts for this, but we won't worry about that for now. Fill.text. And then I get commit -m, modified fill.text, whatever. And so now I have that file in there, right? So I've got a file with some changes to it via this 2-stage process. This other stuff is more for dealing with Heroku. Please refer to this guy on our first lesson class. So there's a Git thing, and I think I might have linked to it as well. What I want to show you now, I don't have written down, and I actually have to look at to show you without using. It's really supposed to use branches. Git undo last commit. Do the last commit. Let's see what we got here. Is it reset hard? I never do that.
Git reset back to hard, and then Git number you want to roll back to.
And I hate doing it. I always use the branches, and I always get lost doing git reset. So how would I? So I want to. So let's say I just made a huge mistake. I'm going to have Milo walk us through this. So I just made a huge mistake, and I want to undo the fact that I echoed this text in there. So if I cat the file, everything's broken now. How do I undo it?
If it's just that one file, you can do a git checkout, and then that file.
Git checkout fill.text.
And it'll roll back to the last time you committed. So as long as you have more than one commit.
Then you have to choose which one you want, right? So I've got one commit, or it'll just roll back to the last one, whatever it was. So what that just did was undo that change. So if I cat fill.text, oh no, it didn't do it.
Do git log.
Get what?
Log, L-O-G.
Okay.
All right. So yeah. Okay. So git status. So you are totally committed.
Oh, okay, at this point. Oh, right, I can check. That's right. If I haven't committed my changes, I use checkout to grab it. Right.
But if you want to roll back from here, you have to do a git reset hard and then type in a few numbers of that unique way of the previous commit.
So this.
set --hard, so space --hard, and then like a few of that A09C.
Oh, that's the one I want, right? Okay. I should be able to figure it out from A0, right? No. A0.
5 maybe.
Boom. Okay. So what did I just do there? I moved back one level in this commit history. This log is the same thing that we see on GitHub, right? So now if I cat my file, that stuff is gone. I just undid my change, right? Even after committing it, even after saving it to my repository. Typically, and so can I move my head back up? So if I say I want to redo that change, no. So if I do it, yeah. So if we look at our log, it goes, you just blew out that thing that you last had, right? So normally that's not how I work in Git. That stuff always confuses me. Normally I would do this. I would create a new branch and call it changes or whatever. And I can look at my branches with the git branch command. And now I have this master that we've been hearing about the whole time, but I also have changes. So I'm going to check out my changes branch. I'm on an entirely different branch. I'm going to make my changes to the text file on this branch. So I'll echo changes on a branch to text file into fill.text. Git status says I have changes, so I'm going to add that, commit it. And don't worry about doing this just yet. We're going to learn how to do this in more detail. I'm just giving you a preview. So changes to file, ls, git status, I'm in good shape. It tells me what branch I'm on. And when I cat my file, fill.text, there's my text, right? But I have another branch. I have another branch where I didn't make that change. So if I check out, git check out my master branch, do a git status, everything's okay, but cat the file, that's not there anymore. It is located, it is localized to this branch. So I'll go check out my other branch, git check out changes, cat that file, there it is. So you can imagine having your entire web application in multiple states simultaneously, depending on what you're doing to it, and going back and forth between those states and so on. The typical workflow here is to have like your main state branch off and start doing some other things, and when you get all those other things finished and tested and you're happy, go back to your main state and merge those changes. So I would check out my master branch, and then I would git, so one more time, git fill.text. Yeah, go ahead, sorry. So it's empty. I will git merge my changes branch. Goes, okay, we just did some stuff. Now if I cat, again, what branch am I on? Let's be sure I'm still on my master branch. But if I cat fills.text, it has now been incorporated into that file. So I have this extraordinary sort of version control management of my project. Makes it so that I never screw up, basically. Lets me screw up is really what it's about, without having permanent repercussions.
And so then you can still run as a web, the changes, the web browser and all that stuff.
That's right. Yep. So. And so I wanted to give you a preview of how that works. Both GitHub and Heroku use this to handle uploading remote files for good reason. This stuff is pretty awesome. We're going to get really good at doing this. We're going to learn more about this as we go. Yes, and so we're done. So Maiwo.
Okay, so the thing about the proc files, Windows, because Windows does some weird things with line endings. When you're echoing it out and doing the arrow, which is the pen, like Windows will do some weird things with line endings. So on PIS, there's a problem. So really, what you want to do on Windows is touch the file, touch the proc file, and then actually open it up in Sublime and type it out.
Okay.
Like on a Unix-based system, that's totally.
That's good. That's good to know.
Say that again.
That's just for Windows.
Yeah.
Touch the file, touch the proc file on in the command line, and it'll create the file, and then just open up that file in Sublime and type out that web, node, all that. Just type it out.
Okay, one last thing before we wrap stuff up. Two last things. Let me show you where our homework is. It's on GitHub, naturally. So if you go to OKCoders, we have an HTML homework. This is it. So basically, we're going to get practice creating Express applications. I've got like 5 HTML files here. So I've got this HTML folder. Look at these files. It's all plain text inside of the body. I want you to mark this stuff up. So this is practice with the tags that we didn't spend time looking at today. But do it inside of your public directory in the Express application, and then when you get your changes, push them to Heroku. So we get practice working with Heroku, we get practice working with a command line, we get practice working with Git, and we get practice working on HTML. You got until Monday to work on this. Won't take you very long, but you have plenty of time for it, so don't stress out about it. It's excellent practice. Continue to review HTML. So I gave some links to the HTML elements. Check those out. Keep reviewing Git and Bash, and keep going through JavaScript. That is critical. Please, I want you to come prepared for JavaScript when we start that in week 3. Very last thing, we're tweeting about this, right? And so somebody at Tailwind was kind enough to remind me, hey, when we tweet about this, let's tweet it at people and use hashtags so we get that social media thing going. I'm not even doing this. But hashtag OKCoders is us. So anytime you tweet about this class, stick that on there. That helps Tailwind keeps track of what's going on. It helps us keep track of what's going on. And it's how the Twitter ecosystem works. And then Tailwind, where our kind hosts are at Tailwind app. OKCoders is at OKCoders. Many of you are following that. And I'll plug for me, I'm at PDAO. So that's my name. Awesome, that's it. Thank you for coming to class.